Now you are ready to determine the precise form of the relative pronoun. You already know from the antecedent what the gender and number is of the pronoun. Now you need to look at the clause that the pronoun is in and determine what its use is in that sentence. This is a little more involved, but it always is going to begin by being able to find the verb in the relative clause. Let's practice. As we look at this first sentence, we were walking to the town with the servants who, whom, whose, or which were working in the fields. We must determine the antecedent of the relative pronoun, which would be the servants. Servants tells us that my pronoun must be masculine and plural. Now, what is the relative pronoun doing in the clause who, whom, whose, or which were working in the fields? I said the first thing that we need to do is find the verb, which is were working. When you read who, whom, whose, or which were working in the fields, you need to ask yourself, who is doing the working? If fields, which is a noun written in the relative clause, isn't doing the working, then that means that the relative pronoun is the subject. And subjects have to be in the nominative form. So our relative pronoun has to be masculine, plural, and nominative. Can you tell me what those forms would be in both English and in Latin? If you said who for English and qui for Latin, you are correct. Congratulations. Let's try another one. Remember that to determine the correct form of the relative pronoun, whether we're looking at English or Latin, we need to know what the antecedent is of the relative pronoun. The sentence in English says, the town, who, whom, which, or whose I saw in Italy was beautiful. What is the antecedent of the relative pronoun? Of course, it's town. Town is singular, and the Latin word for town, as well as in English, is neuter. So this means that my pronoun must be singular and neuter. Now remember that in order to decide whether we should use who, whom, whose, or which Latin form or case of the pronoun we need to use, we have to think about the relative clause itself. Who, whose, whom, or which I saw in Italy is my relative clause. Saw is the verb. Who did the seeing? I did. Well, I saw what? I didn't see Italy. I saw towns in Italy. The antecedent towns and the relative pronoun are the same. So that means that my relative pronoun is the object of saw. Do you remember what case direct objects have to be written in Latin? Of course you do. The accusative case. So that means that we have to write the neuter, accusative, singular form for the Latin, and you have to pick the right form of the English pronoun to fit in the sentence as well. Will you pick who, whom, whose, or which? Think about your answers, and then we'll see if you got them correct. The correct form of the relative pronoun in English is which, because the town is not a person, and so we do not want to use whom. In Latin, the correct form of the relative pronoun is quod, because quod is singular, neuter, and accusative. That's the case we need to make a direct object.